1. The following recollection happened a few years ago, but I have only recently realized that it was in fact a malicious compliance on my part. I had to change schools in between the last 2 years of high school. Both schools had the same overall educational system, and both were obsessed with not letting anyone get away with plagiarism, and so viewed Turnitin as the teacher's best friend. For those who are not familiar, it's basically a platform that checks for plagiarism from any piece of written work you upload into it. The thing about it was, though, that it would check a newly uploaded piece against the other pieces of work that had been uploaded prior. At least that's what my understanding of it was over a decade ago. Anyway, as I said, these two schools had the same educational program. I was even able to take the exact same classes at the same level for some subjects once I moved over. One of them was chemistry. The only difference between the two schools' programs was that the coursework in the first school had to be done in the first year, whilst the coursework in the second school had to be completed in the second year. And since I moved in between the 2 years, I was essentially coming into the second school with all of my required coursework completed, submitted, done and dusted like Jello mustard. And most importantly, Turnitined. This one particular coursework, which caused the malicious compliance I'm about to share, was in a way a unique piece of work. I did a small experiment based on a suggestion from my professor, testing the relation between the rate of the heating of the liquid in a glass container and the surface area of an exposed spirit burner's wick. The experiment turned out to be something that had little to none information online, so I ended up writing most of my coursework just purely based on my findings. FYI, the smaller the wick, the faster the rate of heating, which was the complete opposite of my initial hypothesis. So once I've completed it and turned it in, and got it checked for plagiarism, unsurprisingly, I had almost 0% plagiarism. Fast forward about a year. I'm back in chemistry in my second year of my new high school. My new professor, who was a chill lady but unwavering about rules, was aware of my educational background and the current situation with my coursework, as by then, she had already gone through my file and checked the grades and feedback I received for all my projects the year prior. When the time came for the coursework in this second school, even though my new professor agreed that I didn't need to work on any new coursework, she still insisted that I submit my old coursework to turn it in. I tried to explain to her that based on my understanding, if I were to upload the coursework in question to turn it in, it will most certainly get flagged for plagiarism. One of the deadly sins as viewed by both schools, which is fair enough. No one likes their efforts to be claimed by someone else. My new professor would not have any of it, and kept on insisting that no matter what I say, I absolutely have to upload it. And so I complied. Maliciously, as I now realize. A day goes by and I'm sitting in a different class going on about my day when an administrator assistant comes in with a serious look of concern on their face and asks that I go to the principal's office immediately. As you'd imagine, all my classmates had the expected facial expression of that Chris Pratt "oh snap" GIF meme. So I proceed to go visit the principal's office. There I find the principal, my chemistry professor, and if I remember correctly, the ethics counselor, all with grim expression, sitting in a semicircle around a monitor. They ask me to sit down and start the conversation by explaining how bad plagiarism is exactly, and how they have never seen such a high percentage of plagiarism at any point in the history of this school for any piece of work turned in before. If my memory doesn't fail me, my coursework showed 86% plagiarism. At first I was taken aback and had a momentary surge of panic, thinking, oh damn, this is serious, what's happening? But once I heard the percentage of plagiarism, I figured that it was the damn spirit burner project. The principal asked me to explain myself, so I asked whether it shows the origin of the work that the website thinks I had plagiarized from. They said yes, and turned the monitor to face me. Lo and behold, in admittedly fine print, the name and the author of the original piece of work is highlighted, stating my full name. As I point that out, all three have the "what?" reaction and check for themselves. After realizing their oversight, my chemistry teacher finally admits that she now got what I was trying to tell her before. With a sigh of relief and a bit of a nervous chuckle from both my side and the side of the administration, I was let go with an apology for raising the alarms. So I went back to my class with my nose up high and feeling unreasonably victorious and vindicated, as if I beat some kind of totalitarian system that punishes the creative minds of the youth. Anyway, that was it. 2. Being a travel nurse in the operating room has its benefits. The pay, the ability to take time off between assignments, and the bits of malicious compliance that make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. Been at this hospital for 2 months. I've worked with this particular surgeon a handful of times, but it's always been the same procedure, so I know what he wants for every step of the case. I'm about to start applying skin prep, another layer of antimicrobial security to prevent post-op infection, to where the surgeon is going to operate. He always wants the armpit, front, shoulder, and breast and chest of the specific side prepped. We're operating on the patient's right side. They're already asleep, and their right arm is padded and secured on the arm board. Before I start prepping, the scrub tech immediately says, "You need to undo their arm from the board so that you can prep the whole arm." I tell them no, the surgeon wants it prepped this way. The arm stays on the board. This scrub tech hadn't done this case with this doctor in quite some time either, but they still decided to explain how the whole arm should be prepped for this procedure. I ignored them. I begin my prep. Less than a minute later, the charge nurse comes in to log into a portable x-ray device, as travelers don't often get credentials for those. And the scrub tech decides to ask the charge nurse how the surgical site should be prepped for this case, right in front of me. The charge nurse backs up the scrub tech and tells me I should be prepping the whole arm, in addition to the size that I mentioned earlier. I protested, but Dr. X doesn't want that. He always wants the same areas prepped and draped accordingly. The charge nurse wasn't budging, and they demand I unfasten the arm and do it their way instead. I sigh and say, okay. Cue malicious compliance. I prep the whole arm, and am holding it in my sterile glove, while waiting for the drapes and stockinette to be applied. All of a sudden, the most glorious thing happens. The surgeon arrives, with the charge nurse still in the room. "Did you prep the whole arm?" he asks me. "Yep." "Why did you do that? You've been here 2 months. How do you not remember the prep by now?" "I was told to prep it this way." "By who? Who told you to prep it this way?" The surgeon was pissed due to this delay. As a traveler, I've learned to take the heat for making small mistakes, and I was contemplating taking the fall for this so that we could move on with the rest of the day. But before I could speak, my charge nurse was actually humble and admitted that they told me to prep the whole arm. The doc looked at me. "Did you tell them how I prefer it to be done?" "I did." The doc turned back to the charge nurses and proceeded to lambast her for delaying the case. The scrub tech just stared blankly at the wall. But I didn't look or listen. I just stood there enjoying the moment with the biggest shit-eating grin under my mask. It's a nice day when someone else proves you were right. Needless to say, I didn't renew my contract at that hospital. 3. I have worked my job for several years, and as any job, there are good employees and bad employees. When I started, there was one female that had been on the job for about 10 years, Jay. Jay was lazy. She would disappear for hours, not answer the radio when called, be on her phone when she was supposed to be working, take 20-minute bathroom breaks while we were swamped with work, claim she was studying for school on her lunch break, only for someone to wake her up after she missed her clock back-in time by half an hour. No books in sight. But Jay had one habit that was infuriating to co-workers and administration alike. She was always late for work. At my job, you cannot leave until the person working next shows up. If Jay was 10 minutes late, it was a miracle. Once she was 3.5 hours late to relieve me, and the on-duty supervisor had to call someone to go knock on her door to wake her up. All I got were dirty looks from her when she finally got to work. One time, she kept showing up late and another coworker complained to her face. She purposely parked her car across the street and kept coming in later and later as the problem escalated. The other coworker was put on an earlier shift just to end the problem. The worst time was when she disappeared for 2 months. My supervisor called her after 3 days of no show and left a message. 2 days later, Jay had her mother call and say she was not ready to come back to work after her cousin died in Florida. Checking her Facebook account proved that Jay considered mourning to be drinking at back bars every night. When Jay came back, she still had a job. We figured she was sleeping with one of the higher-ups, but we didn't have proof. Finally, we got a new district manager that was a hard-ass and made sure many of the rules that had been ignored were followed. The job has mandatory testing given every so often to make sure we are compliant with state and federal regulation. Jay bombed out and was fired. Not a tear was shed on her last day. One day I received a call on the office phone. It was someone wanting to talk to a former coworker that had quit due to health reasons. I asked why and found out that it was someone doing a background check on Jay. I was about to say that the employee wasn't working here anymore when the person on the other end said they were with a certain government agency. Think 3-letter agency, and the former employee was a reference. I put the person on a brief hold, took a swig of water, and answered as the former employee. Then I proceeded to tell all about Jay and her work habits, not embellishing anything, but also not leaving out any minor detail. When I was finished, the person thanked me and hung up. This was about 7 months ago. Today, I found out from a coworker that was on Facebook and saw Jay complain that she didn't get the government job she applied for. PettyRevenge completed. 4. I'm a 31-year-old male and started working for my uncle 2 years ago. He has a company with some business partners of his. My work is now being strictly under him, learning every part of running the business and also being a personal assistant to him. We settled a contract in which I receive a fixed monthly amount with the bonus of an additional salary by the end of every year. And while I had no overtime pay, I had total control of my work schedule. And by total, I meant total, where I could come to the job just 3 days a week as long as I delivered results. My uncle knew my work ethic, so it's kind of a win for him, since when I'm needed, I'd work 60 to 65 hours a week, if needed to. Also, I could work during the holiday. We have around 10 or 12 festivity days that are non-working days. If I were to put it into an American perspective, it's just as if we had over 10 July 4th holidays during the year. Also, I was available on call nearly 24/7 if anyone needed anything from me related to work. Work was running great until September last year when my uncle took a couple of days to travel to another state to meet new clients, and one of his associates, Gordon, took his role in the company for those days to support some of his roles. Due to having worked a 14-hour shift the day before travel, and also having 60 to 12-hour shifts the week before, I was dead tired. And since we had little to no work piled up, I took an early leave the first day he was there, and arrived way after lunch the day after, then started working normally from the third day until he came back a week later. He was furious with my attitude, berating my uncle for even contracting me in the first place, since I don't even work regular hours, and demand among the other business partners, the company has a total of 6 owners, including my uncle, that I at least punch in my working hours, and if I don't meet the quota, those would be deducted from my monthly payment. There's a ton of labor laws where I live. Employees have a certain amount of hours required to work each month. Every hour short of that is deducted from the monthly payment, and every hour beyond is paid as overtime. Other partners backed up Gordon's claim, stating that I needed more supervision on what I was doing, which my uncle was forced to comply with. His only remark was, "Since we're doing it by law, it means that we will also have to pay him overtime according to the law, right?" They all agreed, and from October forward I would start punching my hours on the job every day. Cue malicious compliance. That was exactly what I did. Gordon was expecting a decrease of my pay due to being in the company in my least busy week since I arrived, when in fact I usually pull a crapload of overtime. Also, if they needed to call me after I left, they have to punch in the hours from the moment I left until I finished the call, resulting in free overtime pay. One more thing. By the law, the rate of overtime pay increases the more overtime is done in a month. It's a really weird formula. But to simplify, my average overtime hours pays 1/3 higher than the average overtime hours of other employees that have the same monthly salary of me. My monthly income is now 30% higher due to the overtime I started receiving, and in a busy month, that could even get as close as 50% higher, even though I'm actually working a little less than before, and Gordon can't go back to the way it was before, since my uncle made sure that once I started punching my hours in, there was no going back, and all partners approved. 5. During my last year in college, I got hired onto the production crew of a small manufacturing company. The production team leader, purely by virtue of seniority, was a guy I'll codename Dirk. Prison physique, 6'4" when standing upright, face tattoo, regularly physically intimidated other folks in the building for sport. Told stories with strong intentional bigot vibes, high school dropout chain wallet, different Monster Energy drink hat for each day of the week. Dirk's favorite joke was calling me a schoolboy because I was going to college. Get it? Followed by assertions that education is a scam, and smart people are actually dumb, and only, pick your pejorative, go to college, and so on. The other 8 employees in the building really wanted Dirk gone. The owner, boss, inventor of the proprietary manufacturing process was a brilliant mechanical engineer, but terrible with people, and very susceptible to Dirk's intimidation techniques, so Dirk stayed. Anyhow, within the first month, Dirk decided it was my job to take material and product inventory every 2 weeks. Whatever, he's the middle manager, he can delegate. Usually a 3-person job, I was of course made to do it alone. Usually kept me at work well after midnight, but at least I was getting paid overtime, and the building was empty and quiet. After 6 months on the production team, I graduated from college and got promoted out of the warehouse and into the product design office, a great gig, the one I wanted from the beginning. Near the end of my 3rd day in the office, Dirk poked his head in the door and asserted that I was still expected to take inventory that night. I reminded him that I don't work in the warehouse anymore. He reminded me that he's a dangerous person by mad-dogging me into my personal space bubble and cursing a lot. I capitulated, believing perhaps erroneously that my new office workers would have my back if Dirk went berserk. I decided to take inventory in Roman numerals, which Dirk couldn't read. Really show him what a guy with basic 11th grade literacy is capable of. I wasn't present for the incident, but when I arrived at work the next morning, the warehouse was trashed. Dirk had seen the inventory clipboard, gone ballistic, and started pulling everything off the shelves. The police were called. As I understood it, Dirk left peacefully with the cops and wasn't arrested, but was immediately fired and legally barred from approaching the building or any of its employees. After Dirk's departure, we promoted a new production lead. The machines ran faster and more efficiently. All the product came out cleaner, and all the supply problems we were having with raw materials were actually just Dirk being equal parts lazy and stupid. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 240. And thank you very much everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do bonk the like button before you go, thank you kindly. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, oh gosh dagnabbit, I really do like Revenge is Ice Cream, but I wish it was bigger, longer, more of it, then you can find that in a podcast format, which I'm uploading to both Spotify, where you'll find it under Revenge is Ice Cream Archives, or here on the YouTubes, where I'm also uploading them as well, in a slightly later fashion, so I don't inundate you with weeks of episodes at once. Right, now let's see, I don't think there's any birthday shoutouts today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Today's question comes thanks to my moderator Shigar. People are being very helpful, helping me think of new questions, and that is, if you could resurrect an old flavor of soda that no longer exists, or create a new flavor of soda that doesn't exist, what would it be? And that's going to be quite a difficult one to answer because there's so many weird flavors of soda out there. There's a pickle soda of all things, very much in the niche and novelty market. but it does exist. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a roast chicken soda out there. But yeah, I think in my case, I'd probably want to resurrect an old one. And specifically what it would be is there's a drink in the UK. I don't know if it exists outside the UK, but it's very popular here. Perhaps less so than it used to be. It's certainly, from my perspective, it is. It's called Lucozade. Right? And every person from the UK listening to this right now will be having visions, or at least of a certain age, visions of when they were sick as a child, and they would get Lucozade. Then as you got older, you'd realize you could just buy it whenever you liked. So that was one of my favorite drinks. It's an energy type drink, but not quite like Red Bull, but it's an energy type drink called Lucozade Energy. And like most drinks, I'd say about 99% of drinks in the UK, when the sugar tax was introduced a few years back, they began substituting the sugar in their drinks for sweeteners. And it just tastes awful. And I personally can't drink it because my body does not react well to sweeteners. It does not make for fun times if I have sweeteners. So I would very much like them to go back to their original recipe, at least, pre-sugar tax recipe. And as for flavors that don't exist, I would like a soda that tastes like smug self-satisfaction, because we all enjoy that from time to time. Okay, let me know what you think. Let me know what your answers are in a comment below. And I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.